Hey everyone, welcome to another buddy study group for Worksite Solutions. And today, I think what we're going to talk about is one of those cases of common sense that as experts we tend to glaze over. This is really born out of discussion we've been having recently internally as we're helping to create some presentation materials for our community to use. We were talking about making a presentation to employers, to HR. We have spent a lot of time lately presenting to brokers who will present to employers and HR. And those two conversations are so different as far as what the broker values versus employer and HR value, um, versus, like the way of thinking about the concept of the group long-term care sale is completely different. So what we want to do is just kind of go back and forth and compare, contrast. And I think if you're somebody who's going to be speaking directly to employers or HR, this is going to be an extremely helpful conversation to you because what you have in your head as the likely thing to present may not be the same as what they actually want to hear. Okay, so hope that makes sense. Feel free to ask any questions as we go, and we'll give you a little sneak peek of the presentation that we're working on to give you an idea of what we really mean by this concept. So, Mark, we were having this discussion even just yesterday, and one of the most important things that we kind of came to was HR, of course, is going to care about the product, but I think the two primary things that matter to HR, to employers, is that it's not going to be a pain in the neck to enroll this benefit. It's an easy process that doesn't require maybe the traditional amount of lift that's required by HR for other processes like health insurance, especially, but maybe even other lines of coverage. Employees can be enrolled easily. They can get their questions answered. HR doesn't have to be the all-knowing source of knowledge on the product. There are people that they can turn to when those questions come through. And also that they're just offering another benefit, a good benefit, a competitive benefit, a benefit that is familiar and kind of a market leader or among the market leaders, which will allow them to continue to boast about their benefit package and use that in recruiting and in retaining the employees they have. Would you say those are probably the two most important things HR is looking to hear?
Yeah, definitely. The thing that they're objecting to that they're not telling you is, oh my gosh, I got so much on my plate. I'm adding one more thing. It's voluntary, but it's voluntary for me to add this. And a lot of them are going to say, wait until next year because I just am overwhelmed with what I have already. So knowing the role that HR plays, which is jack of all trades, they know where all the bodies are buried. They got to get pulled into all kinds of conversations. You really have to roll out that red carpet, make it feel easy to them that they trust that you're going to take on that lift and make sure that they don't have a huge project to do.
Yeah, and I think what's important to note here is that it's not as if our directive is to avoid saying anything about product specs, right? Or to avoid showing any level of expertise you have as a broker. But I think instead of inundating them with a ton of information, um, you know, we're guilty of having that really information dense one pager, right? But it's not as if we're going through that line by line. What's important to know is that if you're going to share things about product or just based on your expertise as a broker, you keep it within that frame, right? You frame it within how is this going to be an easy process? How is this a good, familiar industry leading benefit that they're not currently offering already that will be of value to them and of ease to them to offer, right? And there's so many ways you can do that with the products that are out there on the market right
Yeah, I
now.
would say it's like kind of like they have a mental checklist and they're looking to check the box. Is it affordable? You show them a sample rate. Check. That's all you
Right.
really have to do in many cases to get their buy into it.
So I want to share a little bit of this presentation that Gretchen's been working on that we had. I don't know. We probably made a whole hour out of conversation around how to build this presentation, and it really just got us back into our legs, so to speak, as to how to conduct this conversation. So I think right away, and this is a work in progress, folks. So if you see things out of place or something looks like a note has been taken, um, that's just because this is a work in progress. But you can see that the language is kept very simple. We know that there's a lot more nuance to these items, right? But does HR, the employer, have a need to know those items? Is the big question. Life insurance chassis, right? There's a life insurance with a death benefit and a restoration feature, even if long-term care is needed, no use it or lose it objection, right? And we're probably going to retool this bullet point even further just to say that there's the flexibility and security of life insurance, whether or not you need long-term care, right? Um, Death benefits accelerated 6% a month for long-term care. Obviously, this is all state geared with extension of benefits rider providing extra 17 months. Peace of mind that benefit can keep up with inflation. This is for the California product, right? Unisex rates, major advantage for female employees. Normally, female rates are priced much higher for individual products. Clear advantage, right? Our women employees are compared to the individual market getting a fantastic deal if we were to offer this plan. That's kind of an incentive to offer it and an item that makes this attractive. Guaranteed and portable. Premiums are level and guaranteed. Benefit is fully portable as individual coverage, employer funding available. So I think keeping things very simple and letting them know why, but not letting them know every little mechanical nut and bolt about the benefit is right where they want to be, right? They want to know enough to be dangerous, where if somebody comes in talking about it, they either have an expert to refer to or they can kind of manage the talking points, right? I saw your email about the long-term care benefit that you're offering. Why does it have life insurance? Well, it's there as an extra value piece for you. And especially if you don't need long-term care, you're going to have a death benefit to leave behind to your beneficiaries. But the product's more about the long-term care, right? Just knowing enough to be dangerous and having people to refer to for deeper conversations, I think is a huge value. But then why offer long-term care, right? This is what we're really trying to sell them on, this concept here. Why offer this, right? I can offer it or not. Why should I? Yes, we talk about, the caregiver crisis that's out there, but we talk about being able to educate their employees about the need or the availability of professional care, right? You should be talking about this on the sale, that the education is going to be there and it's something that you and your team will be able to handle, right? We'll educate them, even if they're going through a caregiving scenario today and the insurance product can't necessarily help that person today. What we can do is educate them about options that they have through professional care to get some relief for their situation, right? That education is valuable, and that person who's going through that caregiving crisis personally within their ranks will have a plan that they can purchase or have purchased for them that makes sure that history doesn't repeat itself in the future if that specific employee needs care, right? There's growing demand for this, right? Other companies are offering this. Companies are, asking about it. They're adding this. So you want it to be framed as something that is a growing trend. And it's not a lie to say that it certainly is. And a lot of other companies are adding it. HR is really competitive and interested in offering the best benefit packages wherever they can, right? So if there's growing demand for this and we're seeing other companies doing this, you know, monkey see, monkey do is one of the good reasons as well, just because of the nature of the market. No health underwriting. This is the piece that makes this super, super easy for HR to offer, right? It's not a complicated application process from that standpoint. And employees can get their certificate of coverage online. It makes the application a quick process for employees. So you don't even have to worry about necessarily managing a complicated process or paper apps or anything of that nature for employees. It's online, no medical underwriting. Your acceptance is guaranteed. That's a streamlined process that you can then talk to HR about. And that will be a sigh of relief. Less management that they have to do of the entire process, right? And then of course attracting and retaining talent. That kind of goes without saying for any new benefit that you add, right? Adding more benefits, adding more valuable benefits is a big key to this, right? So just remember, this is kind of your key pivot point in the sale. Why offer this? That is really what this boils down to. Why should you offer this? It's easy to do, and it's valuable benefit, and it's a valuable education process for your employees. So, again, we're keeping things very, very simple here when we're talking about eligibility. Generally available, depending on product, to folks between the ages of 18 and 70. And you got to be actively at work, working at least 20 hours a week, right? Just keep it super simple. U.S. employees only, of course, is another element to consider. And when it comes to benefits, it's important that we don't inundate them as well. So keep things simple. Talk about what long-term care benefit is going to be available from this, what kind of death benefit, and how do you actually access that benefit. But you can feel free to kind of separate that out between what's kind of a good, better, best, and what does each process kind of involve and what does the benefit look like there. So I'm not going to go through this entire presentation, but I think the more you have in the back of your mind to keep it in the framework of, is this a valuable benefit to offer? Is this going to make us a more competitive employer of choice? And is it going to be easy? I've got too much to do. So if I don't have to do much of a lift to add to my repertoire as an HR professional, I'm going to be into it kind of regardless. And as the expert, you'll be able to handle the follow-up questions. And those follow-up questions will be from that frame of mind, right? If they're asking about, can your enrollment platform integrate with the platform we use for our benefits? They're asking, is this, that's from the frame of mind. Is this going to be easy? Is this just going to work? As a matter of fact, Mark, we were on a call with a pretty high profile group a couple of weeks ago, and the HR person, very busy, showed up late, and they basically introduced themselves and they said, I just need to know, is this going to work? That's all I need to know. Is it going to work? Right? It's almost like that's the only thing they're worried about. Of course, they're worried about a lot of other things, but if it doesn't work, guess who the first one to get asked the follow-up questions is? HR and the benefits professionals at those employers. So keep it simple from that regard. Anybody have any questions so far or any thoughts on the conversation and how to handle it? Um, this presentation comes from Gamma, by the way. This is a new platform that we're trying out that helps you AI generate presentations, so we're going through the kind of editing process now, but this is what it came up with some tweaks from us that we're still working on. Now, I think a different layer to this is, of course, we talk about it all the time, but employer funding, I think, is really key to group long-term care. So again, keeping that frame of mind, is it easy and does it represent a benefit that's competitive and affordable, right? Why offer this? So again, keep that in mind. Participation minimums are sort of guaranteed if you have an employer funded strategy in most cases. It's affordable to be able to fund. That's why we start generally with pretty low benefit amounts. We start with like a 25,000. If we have inflation on it with the Allstate's California plan, maybe we even start at a 10,000 death benefit level to show it's very affordable. You can get this at an average of, say, $20 per employee per month. It's affordable to do. It guarantees participation, so you don't have to sweat over hitting the participation minimum, right? It can generate advocacy. Not only is it important for it to be an easy, smooth process, but people got to participate. That's the name of the game, right? So if you're securing some with employer funding and you're generating advocacy from within, you're getting people started and encouraging them and giving them the opportunity to buy more voluntarily. That looks good for participation. It does factor into HR people's metrics that employees engage with and participate in the plans that are being offered. So again, what's in it for me, right? Um, may get a better product offer. Result is less effort for HR because we get into items like being able to census enroll, right? Which really, knocks a lot of other complicated pieces out of the enrollment process. The employee can sit back, relax. They may have a few pieces of information to fill in, but at the end of the day, you kind of get it taken care of right off of a census enrollment. They're going to want to make sure that billing and servicing is easy enough and well spoken for, right? Employer funding can generally make that part easier as well. ACH billing, if it's available to the group, may make that even simpler, right? Not having to worry about payroll deduction. That's a huge lift for HR. So where you can get that, that's a huge value add. So the more I kind of go through these pieces, the more we start to drift away from product and into the actual process. I think process is one of those really underrated items about the sale to HR and the employer that um, should be included. David asks, are you suggesting 25K life and 50K LTC as a minimum? I guess it depends on the goal of the group. Like if you have a motivated group who wants to do a richer benefit, I wouldn't necessarily hold them back. If somebody wants something, give it to them. But I would say start by showing how affordable it can be. And if they like the way the product works, they like the benefit, or if their culture has just employer funded benefit at its very core, they may say, we actually have room to do more, especially with, um, you know, nonprofits, for example, who have a certain surplus that they have to spend off, right? Can they do two bases, base for regular employees and better base for executives? Yes. And that flexibility is another easy button, right? So you don't have to say do this large benefit for everyone, but you can do it for those executives or a certain class of employee that you're really interested in attracting and retaining, and still offer a lower, but still offer an employer-funded benefit to everyone else. You don't even have to offer employer funding to everyone if you don't want to. You can select certain class of employees that are employer paid and offer voluntary to the rest, right? At certain group sizes, you could just say, you don't have to employer fund. We're talking about much larger groups here, but you can essentially say it's voluntary. That removes kind of the barrier of having to open the company checkbook to offer this, right? So I think sometimes as agents, we're thinking in the back of our mind, if we've seen the whole process or we've heard a lot about the process, they're going to think this is complicated. But go into it thinking about how it's easy, how it's flexible, and how it's competitive, right? They don't need to think of this from the mind of an insurance expert. They need to think of it from the mind of an HR professional. Can spouses get the same coverage as an employee spouse? There is coverage available to spouses, but generally it's not at the same level or it's not with the same underwriting conditions. So, generally, in this presentation, we'll say spouses have access to this group coverage at the same rates as the employees. That's pretty simple to know, right? There's not this separate pricing we have to keep track of for spouses. So at the end of the day, that's an easy button as well. Though there's other underwriting elements you should let them know about. Spouses will have to answer medical questions and generally go through an underwriting process, but they have access to it at the same rates. There may be a small guaranteed amount for spouses, but if they want higher levels of benefit, there may be medical underwriting, you know? Um, so I think, again, just keeping things simple and letting them know how you support them, right? I'm looking to take certain elements of this process off of your plate. Customized marketing. You don't have to think up how should I promote this benefit? What's important to let employees know about this benefit, right? Will help you with customized marketing communications. And of course, you will kind of play a part in letting us know what platforms are best to reach your employees on and how to craft those messages and kind of who the audience is in general. But we will draft those communications for you, and all you have to do is kind of give us feedback, right? Even with regard to the cadence of those communications, we're there to help. Educational webinars. You don't have to be the educator on this benefit. If you've ever had a benefit that you've offered to your employees where you've had to know it all and had to be in charge of the education or didn't have much sort of back office expert support there, you don't have to worry about that. We'll host educational webinars. You can feel free to say your piece to the employees on the webinars. I think that actually helps. But we're there to help you with that education, not just on the benefit itself, but in long-term care planning in general and introducing them to what long-term care is if they don't know. And then, of course, our landing pages that we've shown off before, right? There's education contained there. All it is really providing the employee with a link, and they're going to get education. They're going to get a calculator where they can look at their own pricing ahead of the enrollment, right? For them and their spouse. Frequently asked questions are there. And the link to the enrollment platform is all there, all contained under one link. That's an easy button, right? Long-term care specialist consultants. If people have real planning questions, we've got a couple of them on this call, right? We have long-term care specialist consultants that you can turn to for 15-minute sessions where you can go through and ask any questions that the employees may be thinking about, right? And the platform itself is easy. 5 to 15 minutes, depending on who you are and where you are in the process to check out. And if you have guaranteed issue underwriting available to you, you get your certificate right there and you're approved. Hooray. Process is over. The platform, in some cases, our Buddy INS enrollment platform will send reminders to the employees at, you know, suggested times when they're most active. They can work on their application after work. They don't have to work on it at their personal workstation. They can do it on their phone at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Those things are easy buttons, right? So I just think what we're starting to get at with this presentation, if you were to imagine in your head coming into this call, what would a presentation to an employer look like? It may look something like our one pagers, but I think this side of the discussion really needs to be represented because it is the most important. The one pagers are to get you a further understanding of the product, but I think a lot of these elements come first. A lot of the simplistic characterizations of a lot of this stuff comes first. If you have the interest there, you can then start to dive a bit deeper and really only as deep as they want, right? Because you're the expert who's there to help with that, and you have a team of experts who's there to help you with the deeper dive elements. So just wanted to take you through that. There's some good questions in the chat. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts about that? Mark, do you have anything that you want to add there? I think one page to start in this process. Yeah, sorry about the motorcycle outside. The one pager is really to help them understand the product offering at a high level, and it'll give them some sample rates, and it'll give them an idea of how the long-term care benefits are delivered, and it'll give them um, a lot of the product guarantees and things like that. But first, you have to explain it simply at a high level. This is a long-term care forward plan, but it's also a life insurance product, right? And there's flexibility there. There's value preservation there. There is the fact that it's on a life insurance chassis allows for things like guaranteed premiums, meaning you won't have to deal with employees coming back and saying, hey, I got a rate increase on my plan, right? Framing it in how is this going to be easy for me as the HR professional or employer first, and then dive into the kind of non-personal product specifics. So that's a good
Quick
question.
question, Jason.
Yeah, what's up,
Any
Dale?
restrictions on payroll companies that the HR departments use?
That's a good question. And I think a lot of the questions we get about that is, will your platform integrate with Workday or
Right, right.
Employee Navigator or any of my other platforms? A little bit above my pay grade, but I know the platform that we use proprietarily is meant to integrate with as many of those systems as possible. So you can kind of characterize it that way and then say, as we get closer, we can dig in deeper to understand the integration. Or I'll take that as a takeaway and let you know exactly if we can integrate there.
Yeah, and now I'll give you kind of a little bit more technical answer, which is we
Thank
try to
you.
do the first enrollment off cycle so that doesn't come up as much, except during open enrollment, that they want to integrate it into their enrollment platform experience. So we do the first enrollment off cycle, we'll do it as kind of a standalone. Then we'll do it on cycle, and then we'll try to integrate it with their platform for the second enrollment and the re-enrollments. And that also gives you some time for the technical team to figure out how to, integrate it, which as Jason pointed out, we can do that. But it depends on the platform, and that platform has to work with us to be able to do that too.
Well,
The
example
billing,
would be this large group that I'm working on is Plan Source is there. And if we don't use Plan Source, if we can't use them, then we're out.
right, right. So the ability to do it is there.
Okay.
It's just making sure that we set it up and we have enough time for the tech team to do that. So instead of it being 30 days for implementation, we may just need like 60 or 90 days. And Plan Source has to give us the information that we need to be able to do that.
Okay.
So sometimes, that's not as easy as it sounds, right? So
Never.
again, just give us more time, and then generally speaking, we've been able to say yes to almost all of those requests. Billing and enrollment, though, are two different
Right.
things, right? So I know you'd asked about billing earlier. And the billing piece, generally speaking, we have a lot of flexibility around too, but it's a separate item. Payroll deductions and which platform they're using to take payroll deductions, or ACH direct billing. And in that case, you don't even need to integrate with payroll.
Right.
Sometimes it's even the wrong question because you're like, oh, if we're doing ACH, then I won't worry about it, and I don't have to use a payroll slot at all. So most of the outcomes are good on those conversations, but it may just not be asking the right question.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a common question that we see asked. And I think another thing that we were wrestling with, Mark, is when you start to bring up, the 53 million unpaid caregivers, and you start to talk about how long-term care and caregiving actually affects the workplace, they start to ask about, well, how does this help me now? Right? And that can be a tough question to answer outside of the education that you have resources there to help you. And I think we see a lot of carriers are scrambling to have value add partners that help a little bit more to answer the question of the now. But how do you normally overcome that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the answer, to be honest with you, is we think about insurance as providing funding for professional care. But self-funding is also a part of that process, right? It's not either or, you're doing both. And the same answer happens when people ask us, well, what should I do today if my parents need care today and I'm trying to figure it out? Provide them with professional care. Self-funded, pay for it out of pocket to get professional assistance. Where do I go to get that? You should go to Amada Senior Care, who can help you navigate, figure out one, is home care the right solution, or is assisted living and placement the right solution there? But it's really taking them down that path to understanding that buying the insurance product for their future funding and helping them today, you're still utilizing professional providers to do those services. That's what's going to help solve the problem. The thing you mentioned with caregiving solutions is important. It's becoming kind of a very crowded space, actually. We have probably a dozen different providers, and each one of our group products now has selected a preferred family caregiving solution to be embedded into their products. But that really is to help the family member navigate different issues related to caregiving. It's not to be the provider of the care. It's, well, how do I handle transportation? How do I handle government benefits? There's probably like a laundry list of a couple of dozen services. And the way that those platforms solve for it is they have a team of social workers, gerontologists, consultants that are dealing with those types of questions every day. And they're actually helping the family get to local resources that can help them. So it's kind of like a place for mom, if you look up
Yep.
information, it's like going to direct you to third parties that provide those services, but they're not providing them necessarily themselves.
Right.
So while they're valuable, it's not like there's a silver bullet, you know. If you need a
Right.
couple of
I can't
dozen
I
different
can't
things to solve it,
actually
it's
I
not going to be
can't
easy to solve.
actually insure your claimant parent today
Mm,
retroactively, right?
right.
But there are plenty of other services that help you through the logistics of that issue
Mhm.
because there's huge demand for those types of services. Long-term care is not just about, my parent needs help getting around or
Mhm.
um, you know, dressing or managing their medication. It can be everything. It can be all encroaching. That's what makes this caregiver crisis such a big deal. That's why you see people's productivity dip because they're working full-time jobs at home, being a caregiver and everything it entails. So these services are really designed to um, be there for that caregiver and make them feel like they're not going through this alone and they're actually getting a guided path. But we can't insure somebody today who needs long-term care. That's what we get a lot. So can I buy this insurance for my parents? Right? That's a super big FAQ. No, but there are a lot of resources that are out there, and you have the ability through self-funding to access professional care. That's going to be your biggest and most immediate help to you if you're not utilizing it.
Yeah. So just be a resource. That's the bottom line. And the education you provide is valuable for them. They're not paying you for that resource. You're providing that as part of the overall package, but don't underestimate the value of that. And HR recognizes that, right? Because they're paying for education in a variety of areas, even training, right, for employees. So the fact that you're doing that as part of the service is a big deal.
100%. Anything else, Mark? You know, you can really, yeah, go ahead, David. What do you got? You're on mute.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could you not say, well, if your parents are healthy, there may be an option to find some way to supplement their self-funding. If they're not healthy, then we can get resources to help find out what are some avenues to help make that work better as well. So either way, we
100%.
can help
Great
you.
point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And for me, that was just kind of a characterization of those who are most likely to ask, can I get this for my parents, are going through something that they, actively have a want for this, right? Not to say that there aren't forward-thinking folks who are saying, I have aging parents. You've got me thinking about this. I should do something before it's too late. There's definitely avenues that you can do to help for healthy parents, but for those who are, currently in need of care, we stick to more of those value add resource
Yeah.
oriented solutions.
But I think,
Well, and
David,
I've
you,
had those come up where the kids say, well, can I get my parents? It's one of the two. It's either the parents
Hmm.
are having or they aren't. But in many cases, it's one set of parents, the in-laws are needing it, or vice versa. And then the other set of in-laws don't have it, but they're healthy. So either way, if you show them both options, you can say, well, we can help, you know, fund part of it, through insurance, or we can help get you through this with some support staff.
yeah,
Either way,
usually,
we can help both sets of parents,
yeah, I
in-laws
agree.
and outlaws.
David, usually those questions come up even during and after the education,
Yep.
because then there's like a light bulb that turns on that says like, wait a second, I need to get this plan in place for my parents. And that's where you're right. It may not be a reactive situation, but a proactive situation, even better. And having access and knowledge about the individual marketplace is really valuable, even if you're focused on offering group plans. It's important to realize you need to be holistic because those needs you can address too, whether you're doing it personally, whether you want to refer those cases, because again, we do a lot on the individual side, actually referring the cases to top specialists to shop the individual market. But there's a lot of reasons why that adds value, including the fact that HR doesn't feel like it's one size fits all and people don't have options. So they have one group plan, but they also have an option to shop the market to get the best fitting individual coverage. And it may just be even to fill a gap in the group plan, or maybe, like you said, for a different type of person they're looking to get a plan for.
You work with Amada. How do they handle that? How much do they charge typically
They
for,
don't charge buddy community members anything.
okay,
So what they provide is a LTC claims concierge service. So if they have a policy, they'll review the contract, they'll help file the claim with the carrier. And they do that because it actually allows them to be a preferred provider. So there's no obligation for the client to use them, but when they build that relationship, they're more likely to use Amada to be their home care agency. So they're thinking of it as a low way to acquire new customers, right? A low cost way. So that's why we love working with them is we like them as a preferred provider. They are very concierge minded. They're our clients that we've sent to them rave about their services, but there's also no extra cost. So you don't have to pitch the employer on having to pay for anything extra to do it.
okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, so I think, to that kind of question and discussion, I think that's what the awareness does, right? You're going to have all range of education of employees going in to your communications or webinars or what have you. But then when you start talking about what long-term care is as an issue, as a concept, you know, people start to take in that education and apply it to their own scenarios. You know, my parents are healthy now, but I notice my dad seems to be in pain when he leans into the sink and does the dishes. I should probably, start to look at this. Or, oh, I'm in the middle of this situation right now. I'm taking care of mom or dad with these exact activities of daily living, right? So maybe I should start looking at professional care. That awareness just really creates the questions. And when those questions come in as demand, the solutions rise up to meet that. And we've seen that, seemingly overnight at the carrier level, but there are solutions for anything and everything caregiving and insurance related that you're connected to, right? That you can help with. That's a huge, huge value.
Well, if I understood you correctly, also you were saying that Amada might recommend assisted living if it's beyond the capabilities of their home care on an affordable basis. Am I
Yeah, they
correct in
actually
that?
provide assisted living placement services as one of their main business models. So they're
Okay,
going to
so
look
they
at,
get paid by
yeah,
the assisted
correct,
living as a finder fee type deal.
correct. Yep.
And how extensive are, I guess they're all over. I mean,
Yeah, they have nearly 300 franchise offices now, and they're growing very fast. And I think they're in about 45 states, but they can help clients in all 50 states, even if it's by referring them to another partner agency in a state where they're not located. I think the 5 states, by the way, are in very remote locations. So they're in all the major metropolitan areas.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we'll see more and more coverage as we go from Amada, just, you know, being able to see their year over year growth from this year alone. Um, let's see. Uh,
I think the only other thing I was going to add, Jason, and you covered this a bit, but I'll just reiterate a little bit is it's hard, when we're in this industry and we're learning this language, right, to not use a lot of technical industry jargon.
yeah,
But it is important to be at least self-aware of that and to come up with your own way of simplifying the language that even they see on the carrier's materials, just to help them make it more understandable. The topics that Jason brought up that they're going to worry about. Well, why am I buying long-term care on a life insurance policy, or am I replacing my existing life insurance? Those are really common questions, and the way to diffuse them early on is to use your language to say, "This is a long-term care policy that happens to have the guarantees because it's on a life insurance plan. You're not buying it though solely for the life insurance." Just having your own way of expressing those, and Jason and I even have different ways of doing it, but that's what helps make it not feel as complex, which is the whole point of this, right? Is how do you make it feel simple, easy, right? So that the employer does not get overwhelmed. And they also have to communicate it to their senior leadership team. They have to communicate it to their employees at some level, even if you're doing a lot of the lift for them. So teaching them that language is also going to help them with communicating it to the people they need to. So just be really aware of that. And to the extent where you start to see yourself, uh, don't prove how smart you are because you know the jargon. Really try to help them, understand in simple terms themselves.
meet them where they are, right? Simple terms. I've started saying, think of the life insurance as your ticket into long-term care and a potential hedge against never needing long-term care, right? And when you start, when you develop some language and you see a light bulb turn on, that's probably a good sign that your language is simple enough to absorb, right? So you got to develop your own voice there, but you will, if you kind of read and react from what you're saying, be able to develop that in no time. Mark, we got a bonus question. Abrupt question, but I'm new and learning. Is it obnoxious to get a HELOC for an asset-based long-term care plan of 100,000? What are your thoughts on that? I think
Is
that's
it
an interesting question.
obnoxious to get a HELOC? I have to, sorry, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
For an asset-based
I
long-term
see.
care plan.
So to fund, so to use your
Yes.
home equity, so to take a loan against your home equity to fund
Yes.
asset-based long-term care. No, it's not obnoxious to do that. In fact, I think using that third bucket, right, home equity, that a lot of people leave untapped can be a good strategy. You just have to be holistic about it, right? I'm not going to pretend to be a financial advisor here, but I will say that obviously, if you're taking a loan, you have to understand the implications of, right, paying back that loan. There's obviously reverse mortgages and other tools as well to access home equity. But no, I think they're just financial tools, and if you use them the right way and your clients understand the trade-offs, that can be a good potential solution.
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. It may fit other clients, some clients better than others, but I think there are also things like
Hmm.
that come down to how you do your fact finding, right? Maybe they have an existing annuity that's not earmarked for anything, or some other assets that are just kind of sitting dormant with no goal that may be able to be used beyond
Hmm.
taking a loan. So I think it's just about, um, the range of financial fact finding you do is super important. So you can understand what they have to work with and then really assign a hierarchy of funding sources, right? Maybe we don't have the cash, that's why we're looking at a HELOC, but maybe we have some other financial vehicle that we can use as well.
Yeah. And I think as always, I would refer them to a specialist in that area because there
Yep.
are a half a dozen ways to use home equity
Yes.
to fund, but they all have different interest rates and different terms and conditions. Chris mentioned, he thought it was a good idea for reverse mortgage, but it's really hard to tell without knowing the client's specific situation.
Yep. And every financial vehicle or every area of financial planning has different fact finding too. So if you're not familiar with kind of the home equity or reverse mortgage fact finding, I would find an expert who has been trained on the right questions to ask to assess the fit. Good question though. I don't think that's a question we've gotten before in a really long time. So appreciate that. I think that's really it. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. I agree with Mark. Don't show how smart you are. You can show how smart you are by answering the questions that are asked and keeping it kind of in their frame of mind. I think it's important to be kind of emotionally intelligent in a sense and be able to get into the frame of mind of what your customer is thinking and put things in their terms simply. Um, I think you got to be really smart to do that. So, how is this going to be easy for me as an HR professional or employer? How is this going to be affordable? How is this going to be a good experience for my employees? How is this going to continue to make us an employer of choice, right? And be competitive out there in the job market because it's tough out there, right? Start to think about that more. Obviously, we have a lot of resources available to you to be able to communicate and understand the products, and that comes in time. But really, what is in it for your main customer, your main gatekeeper to being able to sell a group is the group and human resources and benefits professionals in itself. So make it easy for them, you'll make it easy for yourself. So I think that's it.
Well put.
We'll get you a few minutes back in your day. Appreciate you being here. Be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Of course.